My presentation today is titled, How do Power and Interest Interact in China's Gig Economy? Patterns of Conflict and Cooperation Between Platform Firms and Food Couriers. So this presentation is from my thesis project, and I will mainly present how I developed various patterns of work relations through the power dynamics and interest distributions between food delivery workers and platform firms. I will then try to illustrate these patterns with some of my initial findings through my field work in China. My presentation today is roughly divided in these five sections. I will start by clarifying my research problem. So the term gig economy, platform economy, or sharing economy, they initially emerged in around 2008. And in over 1 decade's development, studies of gig economy have led to two divergent lines of inquiry. And presented here, we say regarding the decline in worker power and job quality. So we see some argue that digital technologies provide a more favorable ground for capital to divide and control workers, thereby undermining worker power, while others emphasize the possibility of bottom-up work resistance and institutional and organizational experimentations to enhance worker solidarity and worker power. And similar controversials exist in job quality and well-being of gig workers, again, with very conflicting research findings on the impacts of the gig economy on workers' well-being. So these two conflicting lines of an analysis on worker power and on job quality are further complicated by observations of various forms of conflict and cooperation across different platforms and contexts. Cooperation between gig workers and platform firms can be achieved through collective negotiation or the excessive compromise or sacrifices of gig workers. And conflict can maybe manifested overtly or subtly, individually or collectively. Here I list a few examples of this power dynamics with very distinguished outcomes. We see the wildcat strikes of delivery couriers in the UK, which was triggered by the change in payment policy that resulted in a significant pay decrease in workers' salary. And different dynamics can be seen in Canada, China, or elsewhere, where resistance of food couriers tend to be more small scale, brief, and largely hidden, often targeting direct managers. However, similar efforts might lead elsewhere in other cases. While the wildcat strike in London forced the Liberal to retract the policy change, in Toronto, Foodora Couriers established collective power through the workplace organizing campaign, and their efforts to unionize and to advocate their interests directly led to Foodora's sudden withdrawal from the Canadian market. And so, based on this two different lines of research inquiries and all the different observations on power and the workers' interests, and we now have a series of questions. Are gig workers really vulnerable? Are platform firms necessarily strong and powerful? And how do platforms and gig workers cooperate despite their conflicting interests? Also, under similar operational modes and business logic, why are there various and different dynamics of conflict and cooperation worldwide? And from here, I pose my research question, which is how do we capture the nuance of workplace dynamics between labor and capital in the digital age within a more comprehensive framework? Through this question, I wanted to build a fuller explanation of what's actually going on in the gig economy on the core concerns of work relations. So I'm more focusing on the dynamics on the more like workplace level. To answer this question, my first task was to explain what I'm talking about when I use the term power and interest in my research project. So power, it is a hidden agenda that unlaying the more prominent and tangible subjects such as cooperation, conflict, control, and resistance between capital and labor. It is often seen as actors' capability to gain interests. And following this, we define power in the gig economy as a platform of capital's control and the workers' resistance, while the platform firm seeks to extract design behavioral performance from workers by different means of control in the workplace and beyond. At the same time, workers resist individually, collectively, to protect themselves against such control for the betterment of their interests. And the second dimension to define my patterns was workers' interests. And based on different kind of researches, I listed a few dimensions, how I measure or how I evaluate how workers' interests were satisfied in the gig economy, which are the employment conditions, working conditions, and some more. We'll come back to this later. So the interactions between power and different interests, they contribute to different dynamics of conflict and cooperation between gig workers and platform firms. But how do we interpret such a dynamic based on our very fragmented understanding of power and interest and corporate and conflict in the gig economy? So far, we don't see very good research on how this issue was addressed in the context of the gig economy. But this is a subject that's widely studied by many, starting from Braverman, and through his analysis of labor process theory. Here I listed a simple timeline on the progression of their ideas on workplace dynamics. So Braverman's work was furthered in the post-Braverman writings on two directions. The first one was on studies about the very core concepts of power and interest, conflict, cooperation. The second line was that they made efforts on categorizing workplace dynamics and regimes, which in my research project, I use the term patterns. And the examples of the dynamics regimes can be found in Broadway's work of factory regimes, in Edwards' work on categorized work relations patterns, with a particular focus on workplace conflict and control, and more recently in the workplace compromise model that generalized workplace regimes by capital and labor's long-term and short-term concerns in 2006. So through this process, we see a more sophistication where theory transforms through a control resistance model to a more comprehensive model that incorporates control, resistance, and consent. And it puts actors' concerns at the forefront and examines how the power dynamics among actors is in a more integrated manner. Based on the conceptualization of the concepts and the simple explanation of the development of the works on explaining workplace dynamics, my generalization of the patterns started from these two statements. The first one is that actors' concerns are the basis of workplace patterns. And the second one is power and interest. They are the two sets of concerns of both capital and labor in the gig economy. So now we have clarified how we understand power interplay through platforms, control, and worker resistance, and understand how workers' interests surrounding workers' overall experience in the gig economy. I'm now trying to put a more detailed dimension on how I capture them in my fieldwork. And throughout my fieldwork, I try to observe the power interactions between platform firms and gig workers through control and resistance, and platforms controls observed through their working process control and the output control. While on the worker side, the workers' resistance are observed through more overt collective resistance or more individual resistance, legal resource-based resistance, or organizational or community resource-based resistance. And workers' interests, as we already showed, are observed through these 5 dimensions. I then put high or low based on my evaluation for each party's placement on these dimensions. Based on the placement of different actors, high or low achieve realization on these 3 dimensions, I made a matrix of power interactions of interest distributions, which now shows us 8 different boxes. That's in shade. And we can first look at this matrix on the side of control and worker resistance. When control is high, resistance high, we can see a more turbulent dynamic between capital and labor, and worker resistance might pile up until a level of unexpected occurrence, such as a strike. However, sudden unexpected occurrence are not the normality in a day-to-day relations at the workplace level. And when control is low, resistance high, the same turbulent condition happens. But when resistance is high, and this can be seen in the case of Foodora in Toronto, which led to the platform's exit from the local market, thus ending the work relations. While when control is high, resistance is low, we might see a more stable continuation of a work resistance, and same for when control is low and resistance is low. And now when we see these patterns again, but include the dimension of workers' interests, and we still have 8 different boxes, but I limited box 1 and box 3 for the reason that in practice, when workers' interest realization is high, it's less likely that we will see high resistance. And box 2 and box 4 as describes a more turbulent work relationships between platform firms and food couriers with high worker resistance. While in blue shade, we see a more stable work relationship with low worker resistance. Now, okay. So I'll jump to my my field work. So box B, it can be 10 to box 2 in extreme conditions when control is high, control is high, and workers finally cannot bear it anymore, and they might so a sudden kind of disruption of work relations might happen. And same for box D and box 4. I listed a few examples of my field works, and based on the different mode of work relations and based on the location where the workplaces happen, they might show different dynamics in terms of control and resistance and workers' interests. So in general, through my presentation, I want to try to demonstrate that on a day-to-day basis of work relations in the gig economy, although that tension widely exists, work relations continues regardless of the control level of platform firms. And these patterns describe the non-existence of visible resistance in the work relations between food couriers and platform firms in the gig economy. And they also show the tendency of a stable work relations to shift to a more turbulent ones under harsh control or low worker interest gains. And workers not only consent or resist to the management of platform firms, they also rationalize, compromise, accept, and bear with their circumstances. Yeah, here's the 4 boxes, and which are the 4 different patterns of work relations my thesis are trying to study. So far, I have box A, B, C. Wait. Yeah, so far I have a few boxes filled, and I'm looking forward to finish my field work here in Montreal and Toronto, and to see where to put them. Yeah, thank you very much.